Thinking about traveling again, Phuket plans to reopen the island in July, but only for vaccinated tourists. Latest on the blockage in the Suez Canal, the longer the ship stays stuck, the more likely we'll feel the impact. And some wise words from the special one. Jose Mourinho tells ST the most important match of his life is the next one. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. One new COVID-19 case was reported in the community today, the first confirmed local transmission since March the 12th. Today's other 11 cases were imported and placed on stay-home notice or isolated when they arrived in Singapore. More details will be released later tonight. Well, if you've been vaccinated against COVID-19, Phuket can be in your travel list from July, with Thailand set to waive quarantine requirements for inoculated visitors to the island. In preparation for this, Phuket's residents will be prioritized in Thailand's vaccine rollout. Phuket will be a test bed of the government's plans to kickstart its battered tourism industry. It will then look to reopen other tourist hotspots like Koh Samui. And the rest of Thailand is expected to reopen in October for those who are fully vaccinated. Well, back home, the Shaw Theatres outlet at Next Shopping Mall has resumed operations since last Thursday, 2 weeks ahead of schedule and more than 6 months after a ventilation duct collapsed, injuring 2 people. Its lunchtime showings today for Godzilla vs. Kong were about half full. The take-up rate for shows over the weekend at all 8 halls appeared low as well. The cinema has rolled out special promotions to encourage patronage. From next month to March 2022, about 950,000 HDB households will receive $135 million in service and conservancy charge rebates. This is part of the government's effort to help families with household expenses during the pandemic, with lower to middle income families receiving more. Depending on their flat type, eligible households can expect to receive between 6 and 14 weeks in rebates. They will automatically receive their quarterly rebate this April, July and October, as well as next January. 8 Singapore restaurants have been recognized in Asia's 50 best restaurants list, up from 6 last year. But French restaurant Odette was replaced by a restaurant in Hong Kong, the chairman in the top spot. Well, the other 7 Singapore restaurants on the list are Les Amis, Burnt Ends, Zen and Jean. Cloud Street, Labyrinth and Euphoria are new to the list, but dropping out is Corner House, which was at number 42 last year. Well, the Suez Canal is still blocked, and according to Bloomberg data, there were 238 vessels queued up yesterday. Ships are beginning costly and time-consuming detours around Africa as concerns mount that a complex rescue mission could extend into weeks. Now, tugs and diggers haven't managed to dislodge the massive Ever Given container ship. The blue line shows the more direct shipping route through the canal between Europe and the Middle East and Asia. So, as indicated in red in the dotted line, the alternative is for ships to sail around the southern tip of the African continent. But this longer journey will take 1 to 2 more weeks. Well, you may have seen the jokes and the memes about this blockage, but there are real-world ramifications that may be more serious than we think. About 12% of global trade goes through the Suez Canal. The choke isn't just curbing shipments of crude oil and liquefied natural gas, but also containers of Robusta coffee, the type used to make Nescafe. Well, how will the Suez Canal jam affect the average consumer like you and me? Joining me now is Dr. Yap Wei Yim. He's the head of the International Trade Management Minor Program at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Welcome, Dr. Yap. So, Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung, he said yesterday that supplies to the region may be temporarily disrupted. I understand goods transported via sea are usually of lower value products. So, what specific items will be affected that will matter to the Singapore consumer?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think the impact actually will be felt more immediately in Europe because Europe sources a lot of its imports from Asian countries such as China, and many of these goods pass through the Suez Canal. Minister is right in that Asia will also be affected because if you look at the container trade alone, the blockage will actually worsen container shortages, which the industry is already experiencing and trying to recover from. So, however, I understand Singapore sources many of our necessities and products from Asia and Australasia by looking at the trade statistics. So, for the consumers, the impact is probably going to be less significant. However, for importers and exporters, the impact can be disruptive if they are sourcing from or exporting to Europe.
So nothing to worry about, let's say our coffee supply, because I've read that, the containers of Robusta coffee will be affected as well.
Depending on where you're sourcing the Robusta coffee from, if it's Vietnam, I don't think it will be affected. And Vietnam is one of the key sources of export of Robusta coffee. Yeah, but Darren said this episode is going to cost supply chain billions of dollars because of all the disruptions. And on the impact on consumers, it will also have to depend on the market dynamics and of course dynamics in the supply chain. Why do I say this? If you take, for example, wine and cheese, supposing you're importing them from Europe and selling in Singapore, as a seller in Singapore, to what extent are you going to pass on the increase in costs, if any, to consumers? And as a consumer, are you willing to pay more for these products, versus alternatives if there's an increase in prices? And of course, if you're addicted to them, then that's a different story.
Well, Dr. Yap, Mr. Ong, as you mentioned, he also said an alternative is for ships to sail around the African continent to come to Asia. What are the other alternative sea routes? And actually, is it also an option for some of the freight to be transported by air?
The African route that Minister mentioned is known as the Cape route. It goes via South Africa. And I'm afraid if you are talking about sea route, there is no viable alternative other than the Suez Canal and the Cape route. But Darren said there is for countries that are located in North Asia like China, Korea, there's the rail connection with Europe they can rely on. But this is unlikely to replace the importance of the Suez route because the Suez route is still the main workhorse for the Asia-Europe trade.
Well, the Suez Canal blockage is now likely to aggravate existing bottlenecks and cause even more disruptions. So, Doctor, would that have a ripple effect on Singapore's ports?
Definitely, because the way container shipping is organized today is by using mainline vessels such as the Ever Given to call only at selected hubs in Asia and Europe. So these hubs will serve as consolidation and dissemination points for cargo for other ports in their respective regions. So Singapore is the key transshipment hub for Southeast Asia. And Singapore is also a major port of call for many mainline services that are passing through Southeast Asia. For a number of these services, Singapore is actually the only port of call in the region. So the situation of pileups seen in container hubs around the world is likely to worsen before getting better. And this will definitely have a ripple effect on other ports that are connected through these hubs.
To end off our discussion, Dr. Yap, has an incident of this magnitude happened before?
Okay, based on my recollection, I think the most significant effect which saw the canal closed for a prolonged period was, I think, during the Six-Day War until after the Yom Kippur War. That's from 1967 to 1975 for 8 years. And basically, all the ships got to go via the Cape route. And but recently, I recall there was a container ship that was grounded. I think it is by OOCL, which lasted a couple of hours. So the impact was not that significant. And in 2004, there was a oil tanker that got stuck also for, I think, a couple of days. So again, the world recovered. So I'm optimistic that this situation will be resolved and we're going to see things going back to normal.
Well, that's a great way to end our chat today. Dr. Yap, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been speaking with Dr. Yap Wei Yim, head of the International Trade Management Minor Program at SUSS. Now you can head to the Straits Times for the latest on the Suez Canal blockage. In other global headlines, the World Bank slashed its forecast for Myanmar's economy to a 10% contraction in 2021 from the 5.9% growth predicted previously. Meanwhile, anti-coup protesters staged more rallies today, a day after the junta reportedly shot dead 9 people. According to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, at least 320 people have been killed in the crackdown. Well, due to low vaccination registration numbers, Malaysia will include additional groups in the second phase of its COVID-19 inoculation campaign, and it may comprise Malaysians who need to commute to Singapore for work. Initially provided for those 60 years old and above, the additional Phase 2 groups will also cover economic frontliners like workers in the manufacturing, construction, aviation and oil and gas sectors. But emphasis will still be on high-risk and vulnerable groups. Well, speaking at his first solo press conference since taking office, U.S. President Joe Biden said he expects to run again in 2024 when he's 82 years old. Among other topics addressed, he aimed to administer 200 million COVID-19 vaccinations in his first 100 days in office. He warned North Korea of consequences for yesterday's launch of 2 ballistic missiles, and he stressed that the U.S. will insist that China play by international rules for fair competition and fair trade.
I've known Xi Jinping for a long time. Allegedly, by the time I left office as vice president, I had spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader had. So I spent hours upon hours with him alone with an interpreter, my interpreter and his, going into great detail. He's very, very straightforward. Doesn't have a democratic with a small d bone in his body, but he's a smart guy. He's one of the guys like Putin who thinks that autocracy is the wave of the future. Democracy can't function in an ever complex world. I made it clear to him again, what I've told him in person on several occasions, that we're not looking for confrontation, although we know there will be steep competition. 2, that we'll have strong competition, but we'll insist that China play by the international rules. Fair competition, fair practices, fair trade.
No doubt Jose Mourinho, who's managed world-famous clubs like Real Madrid, Chelsea and Manchester United, has had a lasting impact on countless footballers, including several Singaporean players. Here's a snippet from Mourinho's exclusive interview with the Straits Times' sports correspondent, Sazali Abdulaziz.
You mentioned you went to a school. I actually covered your visit to the school, and I remember you spoke to a boy. His name is Adam Swandi. He was 15 at the time. He's now, I think, 24, 25. He's a national player now. And even now when I talk to him, he tells me meeting you and you ruffling his hair was one of the coolest experiences of his life. How does that make you feel, to have an impact on people like that?
I'm already smiling, and if now a young adult remembers me and he remembers that feeling, that's great. Hopefully he can make his career. Hopefully he can be a happy man. I don't know, maybe go with Singapore to Olympic Games to do something important for his country. I'm of course very, very happy if I gave him a little bit of hope and happiness when we were together.
You've obviously been the special one, you've been the happy one, you've been the experienced one. In 2021, what is Jose Mourinho?
A bit of everything. I don't know, it's so important to try to find a title. I think I am a little bit of everything, but fundamentally I am I am a happy person with what I have, and you know, to live every day with hope, to live my career always in a very challenging way. As I used to say all the time, the most important match of my life is always the next one. And with this mentality, you never get older, you keep yourself younger, you keep yourself motivated. And I think is the best way to live a difficult job like my job.
Well, Mourinho also talked about his approach to man management and how he handles the pressure and expectation of being in the hot seat at super clubs. The full interview is on the Straits Times' website. There's a link in the description below if you're watching us on YouTube as well. Well, do subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. See you next week on The Big Story.